Hello everybody, today is a bit of a treat. I'm a big BMW fan and I often wonder about buying another, and I keep looking at the likes of E46s, E90s, E39s, typically M products. But every now and again I think maybe I'm looking in the wrong place. And that is why I'm really excited to be behind the wheel of this 1991 BMW E30 325i Motorsport convertible. This should be good. Now, when it comes to one of Bavaria's favourite exports, I consider myself relatively knowledgeable up until about the E36 generation. That is the 3 Series that followed on from this, and is easily distinguished by the fact it has more sort of modern looking square headlights. This is the last of the 3 Series with the old school independent round ones. And doesn't it look good? The E36 in a great many ways was a huge leap over the E30, and the E46 was then built on that foundation as effectively a heavy facelift, and is to many people still the greatest BMW ever made, which then of course makes it one of the greatest German cars ever made, which in the eyes of many would also make it one of the greatest cars ever made, full stop. I've had 2 E46s, a 330ci Club Sport that is maybe one of the best cars I've ever owned, and an M3, which is one of the worst cars I've ever owned. So it's fair to say my experience in that regard is mixed. The E36 I've never really been in love with the looks of, but then the E30 I just forget. And on the very rare occasion I get to have a go, I'm almost instantly reminded of the fact that I am a fool and I should really be thinking of these, and then I hit eBay, Auto Trader and the like, and then I'm reminded of just how much these now cost, and then I go, ah, yes, that's why I haven't bothered. But before we get on to that, let's talk about exactly what this car is. The E30 generation of 3 Series landed way back in 1982, and if you were to believe Wikipedia, it was in production until 1994. Which, though strictly true, doesn't apply to all of the models in the lineup. The reality is, the car's production was effectively wound down from 1991 onwards as the model was slowly replaced by the incoming E36. I believe the final E30 produced was the Touring, the Estate. Other body styles available to your E30 buyer were the classic 4-door sedan. You also had the shapely 2-door coupe, which by many is considered to be the most desirable, and you also have this, the convertible, I believe the product of Carrosserie Bauer. The convertible would never be my first choice, and I have to say I'm very, very bitter about the fact that this one has the hardtop on it, because there is nothing more I would love right now than to be able to get the roof off and enjoy a bit of topless motoring. That aside though, this particular example is absolutely gorgeous. It has been brought to me by a pair of BMW obsessed brothers, and I want to say a big thank you to them because they have clearly looked after this car. Though in fairness, in the time they have owned it, about 5 years, they haven't really done all that many miles, 1,000, with the car's odometer currently reading 65,333. Ignoring that though, you would be convinced this thing actually has quite a few less on it, because with the sole exception of a little crack on the dash over here, the thing is immaculate. I know they have done some work to the interior, but beyond that, I don't believe they really had to do all that much. The car is clean, both above and below, and it is a credit to both them and its previous owners. Three-point turn hill start torture test. Visibility is sensational even with the hardtop in place. The clutch takes a moment to get used to, but is not that bad. 5-speed manual gearbox is also lovely, and if you wanted to, you could have also had this car with an auto, but I'm glad to see this one doesn't, because it would have been an older auto box, and though I'm sure I still would have enjoyed the car, I think I'll enjoy it just a little bit more with a manual. One particular curio of this generation of 3 Series is that the M3 wasn't the one that had the necessarily most impressive engine. Because it was still a proper homologation car, like its rival, the Mercedes 190e in its many guises, it had a 4-cylinder. I know today many would associate a BMW full stop with a straight 6, and certainly an M product. The E30 M3, nope, may do with a 4-cylinder, and so, for many, the 325i was often considered the more desirable car. Now the fact is, for a very, very long time, just about any E30, M3 included, was reasonably priced, so you just bought the one that you fancied. I know a few people that bought M3s for £5,000 or £6,000 back in the day. Now, they're worth quite a bit more, with a few even exceeding £100,000. And though I'm sure they're great and lovely and all that, I'm not really quite sure they're £100,000 great and lovely. But I'm not driving an M3, I'm driving a 325i. So what's that all about? Well, up front you will find what many consider to be one of the greatest engines ever made. This is the M20. It makes 170 horsepower and 164 pounds-feet of torque. It is exactly the same engine as you would have found in the BMW Z1, that itself arrived late in the 80s when this car was still being produced. In terms of suspension, you've got McPherson struts up front and at the back a semi-trailing arm system. So, not particularly advanced, but it seems to do its job fairly well. And if I were to ignore the creaks and rattles and things that you invariably get with an older convertible with the hardtop on, it's actually riding reasonably well, striking a nice balance between comfier and sportier. In fact, just a few hours ago I was in an Aston Martin DB7 Coupe, a much later car, though also based on an older platform, the Jaguar XJS, and that was nowhere near as refined or well set up as this. Honestly, don't know how Aston Martin achieved that, but they did. A few of you may be watching this and thinking, hang on a minute, isn't that the car that the Top Gear trio all bought an example of when they were doing a £2,000 cheap convertible challenge? Well, not quite. That was an E30 BMW convertible, but it was a 323. As a motorsports car, this is one of the runouts built in the very, very early 1990s. They had previously done another motorsports convertible, and why they did them as a convertible I really, really don't know, because there's nothing less motorsporty really than your convertible chassis, but hey-ho. And what marks these out is the fitment of the M-Technic body kit, which does look quite nice. You also have some nice wheels too. You've also got M Sport suspension and this Lotus White extended leather interior, which I must say is rather marvellous. This is beautiful, both to look at and to feel. Oh, yes, that's very, very nice. I like this a lot. The upper section of the dash, meanwhile, is just standard 1980s, early 90s BMW fare, which means it is not particularly flashy or showy, but is ergonomic perfection. You notice how the center console is twisted in towards the driver, and it's one of those small things you don't really notice until you're on that side of the car and you see how extreme it is. They kept that all the way up until the E46, then sadly for the E90 they ditched it, and I was always a little bit disappointed about that, because it's something that makes these cars very cool indeed. There is no air conditioning, but unusually for an old car, all of the controls for the HVAC are actually fairly logical and easily laid out. You've got a period-correct Blaupunkt cassette player, which may well be original fit, but might not. You've also got over here a trip computer that it needs the clock setting, otherwise it actually looks like it is functional. Wow, blimey. Up here you've also got a set of check lights, which will tell you what exactly on the car is or isn't working, and it all feels very nice, modern, easy to drive. The steering is nicely weighted, it's not particularly heavy, not as heavy as I recall the E46 being. All the pedals are likewise very nice, friendly. Visibility I've already mentioned, it's pretty much spot on, and this is a very, very pleasant thing to drive. I could do a lot of miles quite happily in this. It's fairly quiet, creaks and rattles aside, it's pretty refined. It's a beautiful place to spend some time in. But it's a BMW, And BMW didn't build their reputation on nice, comfy cruisers. No, BMW built their reputation as, in their own words, the ultimate driving machine. So, let's turn around, get a bit of clear road, put my foot down and see how this does. Well, the turning circle is actually really good. Naturally, because it's a proper BMW, it is rear-wheel drive, and I'm happy to say that the road has dried out. This morning it was not looking good. 5 speeds, rev limit of 6,500 RPM. Let's see what it's like. It's magic. It's absolutely magic, this. I am somewhat cursing the relative lack of rigidity on account of the convertible bit, but everything else I'm in love with. I apologise if you're not really getting much in the way of exhaust noise. I can barely hear the thing from in here. It's got that nice distant straight 6 sound, but as the entire thing is standard, exhaust included, it doesn't make really much of a racket at all. But that, I think, is in keeping with this nice, clean, tidy way in which the car is being presented. Performance, though, I've no issues. The engine responds beautifully, and no, it doesn't have masses and masses of go, but it's got more than I need to have fun. The gearbox is a delight, pedals are really interactive, the steering actually is nice and responsive too. I think the Geo does need a little bit of attention because the wheel is not pointed straight when we are going straight. But in the context of what this is, a nice convertible 3 Series from, well, 24 years ago, it's great. That M Sport suspension also, unlike many of its modern relatives, really works. You put your foot down, you start to carry some speed, you feel it absorb the bumps. The suspension is moving, not the body of the car. It's fabulous. To say this dynamically is better than the DB7 I've just driven is not just true, it's also quite the understatement. This thing is delightful. I think the Aston had better steering feel. This is just a little bit limp and just not that great. BMW has somehow acquired a reputation for having really good steering, and yet I've driven very, very few of them where that's the case. This being said, though, again, it's not an M3. I'm not really that fussed by it. I'm just enjoying all of the rest of it. How I wish I could have the roof off, because that would really just take it to another level. I've said in many videos, one of the great things about convertibles is that when the roof is down, the car doesn't actually need to be that good. But in this case, the car is that good. Love the colour too. This is one of just 50 final edition run-out motorsport specials, 25 of which were this Calypso red and 25 of which were Mauritius blue. But you also could have had the car with either a manual or an automatic. So when you then take into account the fact that not all of them will have survived, I wouldn't be surprised if I was told this car is one of just single digits remaining. Well, you get to just about below 4,000 RPM, that engine really picks up, and it goes for the red line quite strongly. Lovely thing, this. And you see, this is the point in the review where I start thinking, I gotta get one of these. This is so great. It's got boot space, though you can't see it because it's full. Would have obviously more if it wasn't a convertible. They're achingly pretty cars. I know the Germans aren't generally internationally renowned for their sense of style, but when you look at stuff like this, you go, you know, when they're in the mood, I don't really care whether it was an accident or not, they can knock something out that easily rivals anything I've seen come from Italy. They're also happily pretty decent cars to own. Yes, they're old, yes, they can suffer from corrosion, this, that and the other, but you can, generally speaking, still get bits for them. BMW are generally one of the best manufacturers out there for their commitment to their older cars. I'm sure I seem to remember reading somewhere that they're very proud of the fact they've got spare parts for cars dating back 50 years. Which would be nice if it's true. overall grip levels today on the old Pirelli P6000s the car's wearing is okay. It's actually not the problem I thought it was going to be. Might be different if it was wet, but this isn't really a wet weather rainy day car, is it? And so yeah, I'm sat here thinking, yeah, I liked my E46 but not my M3. I like the idea of an E39. E36s don't really do much for me. I loved my E34. That's effectively the 5 Series equivalent of this. Why don't I go and get an E30? And then I remember, because they're all silly money. In fact, one of these in this condition with this mileage, you could be talking about a £40,000 car. And I'm not saying it's not worth it, because, well, that's not my decision really to make. But there are lots and lots of other cars out there I would have before I bought one of these. And that's the problem, isn't it? The visibility is so good on this thing. This is a joy. This is an absolute joy. The weird thing with BMWs, of all eras really, not just this, is that you pay a certain amount for a 3 Series, which would have been essentially the entry level at the time, and then the 5 Series, which when new commanded more money, now seems to command a little bit less. I don't know whether it's because it's not dynamically quite as good, or maybe it's not the model that people lusted after, but for whatever reason, it's the cheaper car. This also then applies to the 7 Series, which are a bargain. In fact, I did drive a 7 Series of about this age that did have a manual in it. It's quite a wonderful car, actually. But would I have as much fun driving one of those as one of these? I don't know. Do I need an old luxury car? Definitely not. Old Porsches are a lot more money than they used to be as well. That's the annoying thing. And I would start looking at stuff like, say, a 928, because you could have one of those for the same money as this, and it's got a big V8 in it, and it's far more luxurious car and more upmarket and all that, but will be a lot more ruinous to maintain for sure. This, though, this is just 6 cylinders and 4 and a bit meters of perfection. If only this roof wasn't here. Oh, I love it. JAG actually offered me about 4 different BMWs that he and his brother have. They're obsessed with the things because, you know, when they were growing up, it was the car to have, and they've bought cars that they lusted after and found actually they're one of the few cars where they do kind of meet expectations. They're nice to drive, they're nice to own, and if you play your cards right, you can buy and sell and not lose much money, or on occasion make money. And I can see that. Back in the 80s, a BMW, any kind of BMW, was a special thing. But he offered me about 4 different cars: an E39 M5, an E39 530i, even an X5 4.8 IS. And he also mentioned that he and his brother had this. And this was the one that I was like, yeah, it's interesting, I'll probably try that at some point. But it was not the one I wanted to try first. It's wound up being that way, and you know what? I'm glad they brought it to me, because this is fantastic. I couldn't wait to get out of that DB7. It was a very disappointing car. It wasn't well, I'm being harsh on it. It wasn't a well car. It needs some work done. This. Oh, I'd drive this till it ran out of fuel. Thank you, gentlemen, for bringing me your car, and thank you, everybody, for watching. If you also have a classic BMW of this era or another, I'd like to drive it. I'm a big BMW fan at heart. The modern stuff, you know what, some of it's actually still pretty good, but this is what really excites me. So if you've got something like that and you want to see it featured, please do drop me a line. My email address is in the description of every single video. But for now, all that remains for me to say is a massive thanks to all of you for watching. Comment, subscribe. I'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.